When a knight lost his horse in battle, everything changed in an instant. The animal was more than just transportation. It was his lifeline, his power, and his identity on the field. Once that horse went down, he became slower, heavier, and far more vulnerable. Enemies saw an easy target, and the chaos around him turned deadly fast. Some knights managed to fight on foot and survive, while others were crushed, captured, or killed. What happened next depended on luck, skill, and the mercy of whoever stood in front of them. Number 1. Losing the warhorse. When a knight lost his horse in the crush of a medieval battle, he instantly gave up the 3 things that made mounted men so dangerous in the first place. He lost speed, the shock of impact, and the taller viewpoint that helped him read danger before it reached him. On horseback, a charge could break a line and open space. On foot, even in good armor, he moved slower, saw less, and became a target for any soldier bold enough to close the distance. That sudden shift is why enemy missile troops often aim to unseat riders rather than pierce every breastplate. English longbowmen were notorious for breaking cavalry by hurting or spooking the mounts during the 100 Years' War, most famously at Agincourt, where many horses were protected only on the head and became uncontrollable when struck, turning an organized advance into chaos. Once the line stumbled, mud and bodies turned the ground into a trap that punished anyone who could not move fast. Losing a warhorse also meant losing an animal that had been trained for years to push through noise and fear. Not every battle horse was the same either. The elite destrier had huge status and careful schooling, but many knights actually fought on lighter coursers because they were faster and kept their footing better when the field turned ugly. Rounceys filled the all-purpose role for poorer men-at-arms and could be pressed into service when nothing else was available. The practical point is simple. If the horse went down or bolted, the rider's odds fell immediately because his whole style of fighting assumed mobility and momentum. Popular images of giant, lumbering chargers miss what archaeology and records suggest. War horses were powerful, but not the towering draft types you see in movies. Studies of bones and equipment indicate animals around the middle of modern sizes, with truly big horses being uncommon even in royal studs. That size made sense. Knights needed agility for sudden turns, not just weight for a crash. When one of those mounts dropped under arrow fire or stumbled in churned earth, the rider could be thrown, pinned, or forced to pull himself clear while men ran at him. A few heartbeats decided whether he found a friendly hand, a spare horse from the rear, or only enemies. The financial hit mattered as much as the tactical one. A good destrier cost far more than ordinary stock, and keeping any warhorse required money for feed, stabling, and grooms. Lords sometimes compensated losses after big battles, but that did not help in the moment when a knight was suddenly just another man on foot. Squires might lead reserve mounts so their lord could remount fast, yet ambushes and disorder often made that plan fail. Even when the rider was unhurt, getting back in the saddle under arrow storms and shouting infantry was hard. Armor that felt manageable on horseback became a burden when trudging through mud while the enemy pressed in. Horses did wear protection in some periods, but mail or padded coverings only helped so much against close-range shots, and they added weight and heat. The longer the knight remained unmounted, the more his advantages faded, and the more the fight turned into a survival problem instead of a charge. Number 2. Fighting on foot. When a knight lost his horse, the first goal was to stay calm, get bearings, and find friendly faces in the crowd. On horseback, he had speed and height, but on foot, he had to switch to patient, close work. Good training prepared him for this moment. He shifted his stance, kept his weight low, and watched the ground because mud, roots, and dropped gear could trip him. The lance became dead weight, so he moved to tools that worked up close. The arming sword, or a sturdy mace, gave quick strikes against helmets and joints. If he carried a poleaxe, that was even better, because its head could hook, hammer, and jab without needing a gallop. The dagger at his belt was not a last resort in a dramatic way. It was a practical tool for tight spaces and could slide into weak spots when an opponent was off balance. Plate armor still helped him. It spread the weight over the body and let him absorb hits that would stop an unarmored man. He was not sprinting like a runner, but he could step and turn with control. The helmet cut his field of view, so he kept moving his head, listened for commands, and looked for banners that marked where his side was trying to regroup. If he had a squire nearby, he tried to link up fast, because a squire could shield him for a few moments, hand over a spare weapon, or lead him towards the rear line to catch breath and rejoin the fight. The rhythm on foot was different from a mounted charge. Instead of one big impact, it became a series of short exchanges. He tried to work with others and not drift alone. Small knots of men-at-arms fought shoulder to shoulder and covered each other when one needed to step back. They aimed at gaps at the armpit, the inner elbow, the groin, and the visor when it was up for air. They also used half-sword techniques, gripping the blade halfway to drive the point with control into those small targets. Wrestling mattered more than many imagine. A shove, a hook with the axe, or a trip could put someone in the dirt, and then the fight turned into a slow push for a clean finish rather than a wild swing. Endurance decided a lot. Heat built up under the metal, breathing grew heavy, and hands cramped around grips slick with rain or sweat. The smart move was to conserve energy and avoid flashy strikes that opened the guard. He watched for missile fire as well, because archers and crossbowmen loved a stalled group. A raised shield, a turned shoulder, or a quick step behind a fallen horse could be the difference between another minute of fighting and a quick end. If the enemy pressed hard, he tried to fall back by steps, not by turning and running, since a turned back invited hooks and tackles. If his side was holding a narrow lane, a ford, or a breach in a wall, being on foot was not a disaster. In those tight spaces, a disciplined line of armored men could block, counter, and grind the attack to a halt. If the field was open and messy, the goal was to reach a formed unit or a banner and use the group to create time and space. Sometimes the plan worked, and he found a spare mount and went back in. Sometimes he had to keep fighting as infantry for the rest of the day. Either way, the ones who survived were not the loudest or the strongest. They were the men who made steady choices, trusted their training, and kept their heads while the fight closed around them. Number 3. The price of losing the horse. When a knight's warhorse went down, the damage reached far beyond the danger of the moment. The destrier was not just an animal. It was a moving investment that took years of training, careful feeding, and constant attention from grooms and farriers. Its loss meant money gone, time gone, and a hole in the knight's ability to do his job. Even a lesser courser was expensive enough to strain a modest household. Feed alone could cost as much as maintaining several farm animals, and that was before you counted stabling, shoeing, and tack repairs. Armor for the horse added another layer of cost, from padded caparisons to plate pieces on the head and chest. When that horse died, or bolted in battle, the knight felt it in his purse the same way he felt it in his ribs. The financial hit could reshape a career. Wealthy captains often kept spare mounts in the rear with squires, but a lesser man-at-arms might own only one good horse and a cheaper riding animal for travel. If the warhorse was lost, he might have to finish the campaign on foot, or borrow a mount on bad terms. Some lords paid compensation after major battles, and later contracts sometimes included set rates for lost horses, but those payments came later if they came at all. In the meantime, a knight with no mount risked slipping out of the mounted class and into the ranks of infantry, which could hurt future pay and status. Reputation mattered in this world. A mounted fighter was expected to arrive with proper gear, a fit horse, and a small support team. Turning up unhorsed again and again looked careless or unlucky, and either image could sour a lord on keeping a man in his retinue. The loss also cut into the broader economy of war. Knights counted on spoils, ransoms, and shares of captured goods to balance their books. A man without a horse had fewer chances to chase down prisoners or seize high-value equipment. That meant fewer winnings to offset costs. Meanwhile, the opposing side gained. Captured mounts were prizes. A good enemy charger might be turned into a remount or sold for cash. In tight campaigns, a handful of lost horses could tip the balance of mobility for a retinue and slow the pace of operations. Even back home, the consequences lingered. A knight might need to mortgage land, call in favors, or marry into new money to rebuild his stable. Families felt the strain because household economies were fragile. Replacing one trained warhorse was not like buying a cart nag. It required contacts, time, and luck. The hidden bill kept growing through the season as the knight paid extra wages to grooms, bought fodder at high prices near the front, and repaired damaged tack. All of that was avoidable if the horse survived. Once it was gone, every other cost rose. That is why so much planning went into protecting the mount. Men fitted chamfrons to the head, chose lighter horses for muddy ground, and drilled remount drills with squires. They knew a dead horse could pull a living career down with it. Number 4.